The Silmarillion, Chapter 1, of the Beginning of Days. It is told among the wise that the first war began before Arda was full-shaped, and ere yet there was anything that grew or walked upon earth. And for long Melkor had the upper hand. But in the midst of the war, a spirit of great strength and hardihood came to the aid of the Valar. Hearing in the far heaven that there was a battle in the little kingdom, and Arda was filled with the sound of his laughter. So came Tulkas the Strong, whose anger passes like a mighty wind, scattering cloud and darkness before it. And Melkor fled before his wrath and his laughter, and forsook Arda, and there was peace for a long age. And Tulkas remained, and became one of the Valar of the kingdom of Arda. But Melkor brooded in the outer darkness, and his hate was given to Tulkas forever after. In that time, the Valar brought order to the seas and the lands and the mountains, and Yavanna planted at last the seeds that she had long devised. And since when the fires were subdued or buried beneath primeval hills, there was need of light. Ule, at the prayer of Yavanna, wrought 2 mighty lamps for the lighting of the Middle-earth, which he had built amid the encircling seas. Then Varda filled the lamps, and Manwë hollowed them, and the Valar set them upon high pillars, more lofty far than are any mountains of the later days. One lamp they raised near to the north of Middle-earth, and it was named Elun, and the other was raised in the south, and it was named Ormal. And the light of the lamps of the Valar flowed out over all the earth, so that all was lit, as it were in a changeless day. Then the seeds that Yavanna had sown began swiftly to sprout and burgeon, and there arose a multitude of growing things, both great and small, mosses and grasses and great ferns, and trees whose tops were crowned with clouds, as if they were living mountains, but whose feet were wrapped in a green twilight. And beasts came forth, and dwelt in grassy plains, or in the rivers and the lakes, or walked upon the shadows of the woods. As yet no flower had bloomed, nor any bird had sung, for these things waited still their time in the bosom of Yavanna. But wealth there was of her imagining, and nowhere more rich than in the midmost part of the earth, where the light of both the lamps met and blended. And there, upon the Isle of Arlamen, in the great lake, was the first dwelling of the Valar, when all things were young. And new made green was yet a marvel in the eyes of the makers, and they were long content. Now it came to pass that while the Valar rested from their labors, and watched the growth and unfolding of the things that they had devised and begun, Manwë ordained a great feast, and the Valar and all their hosts came upon his bidding, and Oluë and Tulkas were weary, for the craft of the Oluë and the strength of Tulkas had been at the service of all without ceasing in the days of their labor. And Melkor knew of all that was done, for even then he had secret friends, and spies among the Maiar, whom he had converted to his cause. And far off in the darkness he was filled with hatred, being jealous of the work of his peers, whom he desired to make a subject to himself. Therefore he gathered to himself spirits of the halls of Ea that he had perverted to his service, and he deemed himself strong, and seeing now his time, he drew near again to Arda, and looked down upon it, and the beauty of the earth in its spring filled him more with hate. Now therefore the Valar were gathered upon Almaren, fearing no evil, and because of the light of the Elun they did not perceive the shadow in the north that was cast from afar by Melkor, for he was grown dark as the night of the void. And it is sung that in the feast of the spring of Arda, Tulkas espoused Nessa, the sister of Orome, and she danced before the Valar upon the green grass of Alamaren. Then Tulkas slept, being both weary and content. At this Melkor deemed that his hour had come, and he passed therefore over the walls of the night with his host, and came to Middle-earth far in the north, and the Valar were not aware of him. Now Melkor began the delving and the building of a vast fortress, deep under the earth, beneath the dark mountains where the beams of Elune were cold and dim. The stronghold was named Utumno, and though the Valar knew not of it as yet, none the less the evil of Melkor and the blight of his hatred flowed out thence. And the spring of Arda was marred. Green things fell sick and began to rot. Rivers were choked with weeds and with slime. Ferns were made rank and poisonous, the breeding places of flies. Forests grew dark and perilous, the haunts of fear. Beasts became monsters of horn and ivory, and dyed the earth with blood. Then the Valar knew indeed Melkor was at work again, and they sought for his hiding place. But Melkor, trusting in the strength of Utumno and the might of his servants, came forth to war, and struck the first blow ere the Valar were prepared. He assailed the lights of Elune and Omal, cast down their pillars and broke their lamps. In the overthrow of the mighty pillars, lands were broken, seas arose in their tumult, and when the lamps were spilled, destroying flame was poured out and consuming the earth. The shape of Arda and the symmetry of its waters and its lands were marred in that time, so that the first designs of the Valar were never after restored. In the confusion and the darkness, Melkor escaped, though fear fell upon him, for above the roaring of the seas he heard the voice of Manwë as a mighty and tumultuous wind, and the earth trembled before the feet of Tulkas. But ere he came to Utno, ere Tulkas could overtake him, and there he lay hid, and the Valar could not at the time overcome him, for the greater part of their strength was needed to restrain the tumults of the earth, and to save from ruin all that could be saved of their labor. Afterwards they feared to rend the earth again, until they knew where the children of Ilúvatar were dwelling, who were yet to come in time that was hidden from the Valar. Thus ended the spring of the Arda. The dwelling of the Valar upon Alamaren was utterly destroyed, and they had no abiding place upon the face of the earth. Therefore they departed from Middle-earth and went to the land of Aman, the westernmost of all lands upon the borders of the world, for its west shores look out upon the outer sea, and is called by the elves Ikaya, encircling the kingdom of Arda. How wide is that sea, none know but the Valar, and beyond it are the walls of the night, but the east shores of Aman were the outermost end of Belagar, the great sea of the west. And since Melkor was returned to Middle-earth, and they could not yet overcome him, the Valar fortified their dwelling, and upon the shores of the sea they raised the Pelori, the mountains of Aman, the highest upon earth, and above all the mountains of the Pelori was that height upon whose summit Manwë set his throne. Tenquetele, the elves' name, that holy mountain, and Olossi, everlasting whiteness, and Alarna crowned with stars, and many names beside. But the Sindar spoke of it in their later tongue as Amon Uelos, whom the halls upon Tenquetele, Manwë, and Vada could look out across the earth even unto the farthest of east. Behind the walls of the Pelori, the Valar established their domain in the region which is called Valinor, and they built their homes, their gardens, and their towers. In that guarded land the Valar gathered great stores of light, and all the fairest things that were saved from the ruins, and many others yet fairer they made anew. And Valinor became more beautiful, even than Middle-earth in the spring of Arda, and it was blessed, for the deathless did dwell there, and there naught faded nor withered, neither was there any stain upon flower or leaf upon that land, nor any corruption or sickness in anything that lived, for the very stones and waters were hallowed. And when Valinor was full wrought, and the mansions of the Valar were established, in the midst of the plain beyond the mountains they built their city, Volmar of the many bells. Before its western gate there was a green mound, Izahola, that is named also Corlair, and Yavanna hallowed it, and she sat there long upon the green grass, and sang her songs of power, in which was set all her thought of things that grow upon the earth. But Nienna thought in silence, and watered the mound with tears. In the time the Valar were gathered together to hear the song of Yavanna, and they sat silent upon their thrones of council in the Mahanaxar, the ring of doom, near to the golden gate of Alamar. And Yavanna Commentari sang before them, and they watched. And as they watched upon their mound there came forth 2 slender shoots, and silence was over all the world upon that hour, nor was there any other sound save the chanting and song of Yavanna. Under her song those saplings grew, they became fair, they became tall, and they came to flower, and thus there awoke in the world the true trees of Valinor. Of all things which Yavanna made, they have the most renown, and about their fate all the tales of the Eldar days are woven. The one had leaves of dark green, that beneath were a shining silver, and from each of his countless flowers a dew of silver light was ever falling, and the earth beneath was dappled with the shadows of his fluttering leaves. The other bore leaves of a young green, like the new opened beech. Their edges were of glittering gold. Flowers sung upon her branches, and clusters of yellow flame formed each to a glowing horn that spilled a golden rain upon the ground. And from the blossom of that tree there came forth warmth and a great light. Teleporn the once was called in Valinor, and Siliporn, and Ninaquete, and many other names. But Lorelen the other was, and Melindel, and Curlen, and many names and song beside. In 7 hours the glory of each tree waxed to full, and waned again to naught, and each woke once more to life an hour before the other ceased to shine. Thus in Valinor twice every day there came a gentle hour of softer light, when both trees were faint, and their gold and silver beams were mingled. Teleporn was the elder of the trees, and came first to full stature and to bloom, and the first hour in which he shone, the white glimmer of the silver dawn, the Valar reckoned not unto the tale of hours, but named it the opening, and counted from it the ages of the reign in Valinor. Therefore at the 6th hour of the first day, and of all the joyous days thereafter, until the darkening of Valinor, Teleporn ceased his times of flower, and at the 12th hour Lorelin her blossoming. And each day of the Valar and Aman contained 12 hours, and ended with the second mingling of the lights, in which Lorelin was waning, but Teleporn was waxing. But the light that there was spilled from the trees endured long, ere it was taken up into the airs or sank down into the earth. And the dews of Teleporn, and the rain that fell from Lorelin, Vada hoarded in great vats, like shining lakes, that were to all the land of the Valar as wells of water and of light. Thus began the days of the bliss of Valinor, and thus began also the counting of time. But as the ages drew on the hour appointed by Ilúvatar for the coming of the firstborn, Middle-earth lay in the twilight beneath the stars, that Vada had wrought in the ages forgotten of her labours at Ea, and in that darkness Melkor dwelt, and still often he walked abroad, in many shapes of power and of fear. And he wielded his cold and his fire from the tops of the mountains to the deep furnaces that are beneath them, and whatsoever was cruel or violent or deadly in those days is led to his charge. From the beauty and bliss of Valinor, the valor came seldom over the mountains to Middle-earth, but gave to the lands beyond the Pelor their care and their love. And in the midst of the blessed realm were the mansions of Iule, and there he labored long. For in the making of all things in that land he had the chief part, and he wrought there many beautiful and shapely works, both openly and in secret. Of him comes the lore and knowledge of the earth, and of all things that it contains, whether the lore of those that make it or not, but seek only for the understanding of what is. For the lore of all craftsmen, the weaver, the shaper of wood, the worker in metals, and the tiller and husbander also, through these last, and all that deal with things that grow and bear fruit, must look also to the spouse of Iule, Yavanna, Kementare. Iule it is who is named the friend of the Noldor, for of him they learned much in after days, and they the most skilled of the elves, and in their own fashion, according to the gifts which Ilúvatar gave to them, they added much to his teaching, delighting in tongue and in script, and in the figures of broidery, of drawing, and of carving. The Noldor also it was who first achieved the making of gems, and the fairest of all gems were the Silmarils, but they are lost. But Manwë, Sulamo, highest and holiest of the Valar, sat upon the borders of Aman, forsaking not in his thought the outer lands. For his throne was set in majesty upon the pinnacle of the Teniquatele, the highest of the mountains of the world, standing upon the very margins of the sea. Spirits in the shape of hawks and eagles flew over to and see from his halls, and their eyes could see to the depths of the seas, and perceive the hidden caverns beneath the world. Thus they brought to him well nigh all that passed in Arda. Yet some things were hidden, even from the eyes of Manwë, and the servants of Manwë, for well Melkor sat upon his darkened thought impenetrable shadows lay. Manwë has no thought for his own honor, and is not jealous of his power, but rules all to peace. The Vanya he loved best of all the elves, and of him they received song and poetry, for poetry is the delight of Manwë, and the song of words is his music. His raiment is blue, and blue is the fire of his eyes, and his scepter is of sapphire, which the Noldor wrought for him, and he was appointed to be the Vizier of Ilúvatar, king of the world of the Valar and elves and men, and the chief defense against the evil of Melkor. With Manwë dwelt Varda the most beautiful, she who in the Sindarin tongue is named Elebrith, queen of the Valar, maker of the stars, and with them were a great host of spirits in blessedness. But Ulmo was alone, and he abode not in Valinor, nor ever came thither unless there was a need for great counsel. He dwelt with the beginning of Arda in the outer ocean, and still he dwells there. Thence he governs the flowing of the waters, and the ebbing and the coursing of all the rivers, and the replenishment of the springs, the distilling of all dews and rain in every land beneath the sky. In the deep places he gives thought to music great and terrible, and the echo of the music runs through all the veins of the world in sorrow and in joy. For if joyful is the fountain of the rising sun, its springs are in the wells of sorrow, unfathomed at the foundation of the earth. The Telari learned much of Ulmo, and for this reason their music was both sadness and enchantment. Salmar came with him to Arda, he who made the horns of Ulmo, that none may ever forget who once has heard them, and Oissa, and Uenen also, to whom he gave the government of the waters and the movements of the inner sea, and many other spirits beside. And thus it was by the power of Umo that even under the darkness of Melkor, life coursed still through many secret lands. And the earth did not die, and to all who were lost in the darkness, or wandered far from the light of the Valar, the ear of Umo was ever open, nor was he ever forsaken Middle-earth. And whatsoever may since have befallen of ruin or of change, he has not ceased to take thought for it, and will not until the very end of days. And in that time of dark Yavanna also was unwilling utterly to forsake the outer lands, for all things that grew are dear to her, and she mourned for the works that she had begun in Middle-earth, but Melkor had marred. Therefore, leaving the house of Iule and the flowering meads of Valinor, she would come at times and try to heal the hurts of Melkor, and then returning she would ever urge the Valar to that war with his evil dominion, that they must surely wage ere the coming of the firstborn. And Arome, tamer of beasts, would ride too at whiles upon the darkness of that unlit forest. As a mighty hunter he came with spear and with bow, pursuing to the death the monsters and fell creatures of the kingdom of Melkor. And his white horse Nahar shone like silver upon the shadows. Then the sleeping earth trembled at the beat of his golden hoofs, and in the twilight of the world Orome would sound the Valarim, his great horn upon the plains of Arda, whereat the mountain did echo, and the shadows of evil did flee away. And Melkor himself did quail in Utumno, foreboding the wrath to come. But even as Orome passed, the servants of Melkor would gather again, and the lands were filled with shadows and with deceit. Now all is said concerning the manner of the earth and its rulers in the beginning of days, and ere the world, because such as the children of Ilúvatar have known it. For elves and men are the children of Ilúvatar, and since they understand not fully that theme by which the children enter into the music, none of the Anar dared to add anything to their passion, for which reason the Valar are to those kindreds rather than Eldars, and the chieftain then their masters. And if even in their dwellings the elves and men, the Anar have endeavoured to force them when they would not be guided, seldom has this turned to good, howsoever good the intent. The dwellings of the Anar have indeed been mostly with the elves, for Ilúvatar made them more like in nature to the Anar, though less in might and in stature, whereas to men he gave strange and wondrous gifts. For it is said that after the departure of the Valar there was silence, and for an age Ilúvatar sat alone in thought. Then he spoke and said, Behold, I love the earth, which shall be a mansion for the Quendi and the Etan. But the Quendi shall be the fairest of all earthly creatures, and they shall have and shall conceive and bring forth more beauty than all my children, and they shall have the greater bliss in this world. But the Etani I will give a new gift. Therefore he willed that the hearts of men should seek beyond the world, and should find no rest therein, but they should have a virtue to shape their life, amid the powers and amid the chances of the world, beyond the music of the Anar, which is as fate of all things else, and of their operation everything should be in form and deed completed, and the world fulfilled unto the last and smallest. But Ilúvatar knew that men, being set amidst the turmoils of the powers of the world, would stray most often, and would not use their gifts in harmony. And he said, These two in their time shall find that all that may be redound upon the end, only to the glory of my works. Yet elves believe that men are often a grief to Manwë, who knows most of the mind of Ilúvatar, for it seems to the elves that men resemble Melkor most of all the Anar, although he has ever feared and hated them, even those that served him. It is one with his gifts of freedom that the children of men dwell only a short space in the world alive, and are not bound to it, and depart soon whither the elves know not, whereas the elves remain until the end of days, and their love of the earth and all the world is more singular, more poignant, therefore, and as the years lengthen, ever more sorrowful, for the elves die not till the world dies, unless they are slain, or waste in grief, and to both these seeming deaths they are subject. Neither does age subdue their strength, unless one grow weary of the 10,000 centuries, and dying they are gathered to the halls of Mandos and Velenar, where hence they may in time return. But the sons of men die indeed, and leave the world, where therefore they are called guests, or strangers. Death is their fate. It is the gift of Iluvatar, which as time wears even the powers shall envy. But Melkor has cast his shadow upon it, and confounded it with darkness, and brought forth evil out of the good, and fear out of the hope. Yet of old the Valar declared to the elves in Valinor that men shall join in the second music of the Ainur, whereas Iluvatar has not revealed what he proposes for after the elves after the world's end, and Melkor has not yet to discover it.